Okay.
All right, got it. So anyway, I mentioned about the 3-in-1, and that's part of certainly Christianity making a point that it's there. So the soul, the mediator, or the middle principle is part of that 3-in-1. And it says I'm looking at section B. There are 2
Page
angles.
33. I just wanted you to, we're on page 33, just for anybody joining us off the, the new recording.
All right. So there's 2 angles or points of view which the nature of the soul must be grasped. One is the aspect of the soul in relation to the 4th kingdom in nature. That's us, the human, and the other of the subhuman kingdoms in nature, which must be remembered are reflections of the 3 higher. It should be borne in mind that the soul of matter, the anima mundi, is the sentient factor in substance itself. Its responsiveness of matter throughout the universe, the innate faculty in all forms from an atom to the physicist to the solar system of the astronomer, which produces the undeniable intelligent activity which all demonstrate. It can be called attractive energy, coherency, sentiency, aliveness, awareness, or consciousness. And I want to cap that word consciousness, put a big star by that one. We're dealing with a lot of that on this planet, in our awareness, in our education right now, trying to figure out what all that represents. But perhaps the most illuminating term is that the soul is the quality of every form which manifests. It is the subtle something which distinguishes one element from another, one mineral from another, and actually one person from another. It is the intangible, essential nature of the form, which is the vegetable kingdom, determines if it's a rose or a cauliflower, elm or a watercress, shall come into being. It is a type of energy which distinguishes the varying species of animal kingdom, makes one man different from another in his appearance, his nature, his character. The scientist has tabulated, investigated, and analyzed the forms, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to jump down to the history of their evolutionary process, been studied, but the solutions of the problem of life itself still eludes the wisest until understanding of the web of life, or the body of vitality, which underlies every form, links every part of every form with every other part, is recognized and known to be a fact in nature. The definition of the soul may be regarded as something more feasible than that of spirit, owing to the fact that there are many people who have experienced sometime or another an illumination, an unfoldment, an uplifting, a beatitude, which have convinced them there is a state of consciousness. And wow, we're back to consciousness, so far removed from that normally experienced as to bring them into a new state of being and a new level of awareness. It is something felt and experienced and involved, that psychic expansion which the mystic has registered down the ages. St. Paul refers to as being caught in the 3rd heaven, and that is the 3rd heaven, the essence of what consciousness is. All are talking about the same word. So I want to go from there over to Annie Besant's book on consciousness. So and we are conscious creating machinery. And that's one of the things I want you to understand is you've got all the equipment. You were born with it to do what you're meant to be doing on this planet, in serving the purpose of the planet, if you will. But the great 3-in-1 is the union of spirit and matter, and then the relationship between the two. That is it. And that is your 3-in-1. And So I'm going to take, I'm on page 4 on my book and study of consciousness. It's the introduction. And she's starting to deal with consciousness, and all is separable into the I and the not I, the self and the not self. And that one is important to understand. Every separate thing is summed up under one or other of the headings of self or not self. There is nothing which cannot be placed under one of them. Self is life, consciousness. The not self is matter and form. Here then we have the duality. I guess that's the duality that you were talking about earlier, Donnie. But the twain are not two separate things, isolated and unrelated. There is a continual relation between them, a continual approach and withdrawal, an identification and a repudiation, and this interplay shows itself as the ever-changing universe. So remember when we did a little, well, we haven't looked at twin dimensions itself, but we understand, for example, that our eye reads light and decodes light, and we see what we see from it. For example, that's what we do. And let me just put it this way. There is going to be a day when you will see this. You have many levels, and that's part of what the chart that we'll look at with Donnie. You have many levels of capacity of seeing, for example. One of them was with the eyeballs. There's 4 other different levels that you can function on. And when you start seeing the etheric in those realms, then you see how energy moves, you see what's going on. And everything that these books talk about, eventually you'll have the capacity in your own developmental program, when it's appropriate, in whatever cycle you're in, you will actually see it and be able to see it as it is, how it works and how it functions. So you're not just going to have to believe somebody else. And that's when you'll really believe it. It's because you'll have experienced it yourself. And this is it's also a real mind game that is going on. Some of what science started explaining when it got to the quantum, and the one that Einstein had such a hard time with, because he could not see God playing dice with the universe, I guess is the way he looked at it. But when we get into the more abstract parts of ourselves, yeah, I mean, it's like science fiction. And so the relationship between them, a continual approach, withdrawal, identification, repudiation, back and forth, what we really have is we have the union of spirit and matter. And that's fine. Here's 2 isolated things, but if they can't hold together, if they can't come together to create consciousness and then have consciousness continue to exist, that would just be a blowout every time. Oh yeah, I experienced it, now it's gone. It was a one-time thing or something. What this is indicating is there's the relation between the two, and the relation between the two is preserved, if you will, probably a bad word, but I'm going to use it for the moment, in what we call consciousness. So that our consciousness now, it has a certain degree of memory of it. Depends if you have short-term, long-term memory or what your memory is. But the point is, the relationship, and what they're going to say here is that relationship, which continues to exist, is the soul. And that would also make sense if we're collecting our little vibrations, if we're collecting our levels of experience, our interactions, And they're being collected in the soul. That's consciousness. So, I mean, this is a big leap. Ask any questions you want, because I think I'm doing a poor job of trying to explain this. I know it, I can see it, I've seen it. But being able to put it in words for somebody else is not always easy. So I'm opening this up to questions right now before I keep stumbling down the road.
So the soul represents that union.
Yeah, it is the result. I mean, I can't say it's the result of it. The result of it is the consciousness, but yes, in a way it is. And what are we doing in this second solar system? Because we know we're in a 3-part grand long stream system, correct? We had the first solar system, which we don't know a thing about, other than in an abstract form, that created matter, intelligent matter that could respond. And now, and we do have life. That's that monadic essence that was at the beginning. It'll always be here. It's through all 3 parts of the system, but it's not fully developed itself, life, until the 3rd system. So what's happened is we've got intelligent matter, and now we've got the union of that intelligent matter and life. So in other words, the dirt knows what to do, if you will, because it's that the first system got it to a point where it could respond when interacted with intelligent matter. And okay, so here's the game plan. Here's the etheric body that we saw last week. Okay, now somebody comes in and fills in the blanks, and we get physical form matter. That's a short version. But so if they talk about the soul being the quality, then it's a component of everything we've experienced to this point and can express. That's our consciousness. They will ultimately in here say the soul is, it's what we're producing in this system, if you will. We've each got our own, but there's the collective soul. You're going to see the oversoul, you're going to see the soul of this and that, but it's all of this. And this is what we are producing through this whole second system. We're identifying it at this point in time for our ability to categorize as consciousness. And we haven't been looking at consciousness that long. As I remember when the studies first started coming out, and Arizona was a big one with consciousness studies. Probably the latter part of the 1990s or something, maybe a little earlier. And I thought, gee, if they're looking at consciousness now as something that they can observe, then they have to be outside of it, which meant we've advanced. Somewhere along the line, that said to me, we've had a level of advancement where we can actually, to get a perspective, you have to be able to stand outside of something or stand back after the fact and take a look at it. So I felt that what that really said was there's some advanced levels of human development on this planet that are up near the top or something now, where they've broken through that and now can look back, and we can start to look at consciousness as a full unit. Because I would say, what, in the 1950s, was anybody really looking at our consciousness? We were so in it, but I don't think we've been able to get a perspective on the outside, other than a few advanced few probably who weren't even, well, obviously Annie Besant was talking about it, but the majority of people weren't. And the study of it in terms of in this country was only just beginning not that long ago.
Carla,
Yeah.
would you say that what, so I'm just from just a outside perspective, I guess, with the, I'm just trying to think of the right word for it. So mindfulness has become like a bigger thing that's out there, like that's a little bit more easier for people to grasp. Would we connect that with consciousness?
You'd have
Like, is
to,
it just a new word?
right.
Is it just like a new word for people to, sometimes you just put a different label on it for people to understand, or for people to
Would
kind
be,
of come
what does
to?
mindfulness represent? Because I've seen the word, I've never pursued figuring
A
out.
lot, it's becoming, to me, I'm seeing it a lot more, even through work with mindfulness. And it's just people being more aware of self and aware of like what's going on in the world, and a lot more introspection than I guess what we're used to doing. And I just find sometimes there's just things they put a label on to kind of always get us to the same thing. So sometimes they take one idea and give it a new spin, and that becomes like the word du jour. So right now, like mindfulness, I think, is the word that they're using. And I'm wondering if it's connected to consciousness, because it's just more awareness. To me, it's awareness of self and everything around you, and maybe and the relation between the two. So I'm wondering if that's where a lot of the connection is, and the word mindfulness or some of the mindfulness studies going on is just something that's more digestible for people who maybe are just starting to get that something's changing or something's shifting in their lives. So you need sometimes it's really just the wording that helps them get to where they need to go. So I'm just wondering if some of the mindfulness studies that are going on or have gone on, and there's a lot of books on it now, are kind of just a more digestible way of trying to take something like Alice Bailey's work and make it more relatable in the fact that people can get to it quicker, or they don't have to dive too even though mindfulness makes you dive deeper. It just makes it more palatable, or easier concept for people to grasp that are just starting to realize what they're going through. Like if they're, like if we're just starting to go through transitions and you're like, what's going on with me? But you're seeing, oh, mindfulness. You're like, oh, okay, that kind of sounds like what's happening with me right now. So I'm just wondering if that's where some of the connections are. I haven't done I haven't read through any of it where I'm seeing where people are making references. You get your mindfulness journals, and, it's kind of, to me, like doing the work, but lightly, something that makes it easier for a busy life, that's just introducing people to maybe consciousness and to
Well,
examining
any and
soul.
all of everything we're doing is in consciousness, but I guess my question would be, are they learning to pay attention to themselves to realize they have a self?
I'm going with yes on that, because it really is people, again, and sometimes I think it's just wording. It's a lot of introspection and taking a moment to just
I mean, does
learn
that,
about their self.
yeah, does that pull them out of having
Can
to
I
read
share for a
what?
second?
Mm-hmm.
So I've done a lot of mindfulness stuff with the VA, and it's a lot of grounding. It's a way to get out of your thought loops or intrusive thoughts and things like this. If you go past mindfulness into a type of therapy that's called ACT, or ACT, Alpha Charlie Tango, that's available at the VA, they do have some Zen Buddhist principles, and they remind you that you're not your thoughts, you're not your pain, you're not your body, bits and pieces taken away. So I think Melissa is absolutely right. These things are like gateway drugs of thought, from mindfulness, which is a very light level, like you say, Melissa,
Mm-hmm.
where they just say, notice yourself, notice your breathing rate. Hey, pick up that coin and, feel its temperature, feel its texture. And what they're trying to do is get you grounded back into a calmer state of mind. So I'm not 100% sure if that alone is a good intro, but I know that ACT therapy really opened the door for me years and years ago to get out of the hamster wheel thinking and understand a little bit better about who and what I am.
Okay, so, yeah, I can understand that. And that was part of my question was, does it get them back into figuring out who they are so they don't have to go look on Facebook or for somebody to tell them they're a nice person or they're an asshole or they're this or they're that. You know, to get them back to themselves. It's like looking at your chart, you know, and starting to ground into who you are, what your pattern is, so on and so forth, brings you back to an individual with a life. Okay, but and I'm diverging a little bit from what you said, Mike, because I understand in this case, yeah, it's just getting you to a point where you understand you're not your whole environment, you know, and you're not every little whim that goes through your head, but consciousness itself is the creation literally of this universe at this point in time, to bring it to its real expansion of, and we're in it, but we're producing. If you went to your physics of consciousness, he explains exactly how this body does that. And our body is a consciousness creating machine. We are on this planet to do that at this point in time. So I'm just trying to point that this is really a very large subject of which he brings the soul in and basically is saying, look, the soul is, and he ties it right to the word consciousness here. And so it's descriptive of, in this case, the individual and who he is and who he collectively is through the entire journey that we have on this planet, going from on the chart that's on 117, from the bottom to the top. But it's much more than just the moment or the mindfulness. I think the mindfulness is a ground level. Hey, you know, you're just not a walking zombie. You actually have, you can put this together here and pull yourself together and have a clue. And then if you can grasp that, I would imagine then you just grasp more. But unless you've had some, and I say this because like my grandkids, of course, they know their charts. My daughter knew her chart when she was young. She would call me, Mom, you gotta look at my chart because I know I'm having a transit right now. She was aware of that because somebody brought that into her world, that she had an existence and she had a path and she had a program and she was playing through a given personality dynamic. I didn't stress so much on that in those days as we would get to transits or activity levels. So the point being, and other children, when their parents, and I don't like to do them until they're late teens because they really have to have some developmental grasp of themselves. But when they get that awareness and that grounding at that early an age, let's say 16, 17, a parent sometimes will bring a child who's exceptional or is starting to experience more than just the normal life pattern a kid has at 16. And they become aware that they've got a path and a program, and they see its truth as they are living it. Because, you know, those transits do show up, and they understand. I don't usually, when it comes to a personality program, tell them something they don't know, but I've confirmed what they've spent most of their teen years trying to figure out is, am I this, am I that? But what happens after that is then they go faster and direct themselves into life and take steps and levels of experience that advance them earlier for no other reason other than now they believe in themselves. and them, that has been confirmed for them, and they go with it. Because they already knew that, now it's stronger in them. So that's great that there aren't that many young people who have that experience. You know, there's not that many kids. There's a lot of them who have some interest, but they don't have a scope to really ground even astrology, you know. But so what I'm saying is the majority of them out there haven't got a clue who they are. They haven't really had much of a religious grounding, the majority of them now. There's still few, but on the overall, no. They're just out there floating, you know, with social networks. I don't know if it's less now than it used to be, because I remember 8-10 years ago, you would have these people who were killing themselves over what somebody said on their social network. I don't know if that, say that again, Donnie.
Yeah, it's still happening. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Kids' hospitals are actually, the kids' psychological wards are full, as far as I understand, still.
Sorry to hear that. But yeah, so I mean, they just don't. So I think mindfulness probably starts to bring somebody back into focusing on themselves. And then we have lots of phenomena on this planet to experience. And if you don't have a real strong sense of self, then that can be overwhelming. So pretty soon you don't know who you are. I think, Mike, you were talking about, you know, coming in touch with reality, the temperature of this or that. You're not this, you're not that, you're you, but you're responding to that, where they just are running wide open and have no clue. Does that fill in any blanks?
Oh, I think definitely, because it was just as we're talking, and it's just kind of for me finding the relativity to things that I've looked at, or things, you know, as we're going through transitions, you're like, what's going on, and you're trying to find self, you know. So you see things like mindfulness. Again, it's something that's bigger, that's out there now.
Oh, it definitely is.
Right.
I'm sure part
So
of it started
so
from this.
you know, as we've talked in the past about, you know, we're switching to a different age right now. So I'm just wondering if that's part of it, you know, that more of you know, the collective consciousness is this is where the shift is happening with the change in age. That
Yeah, well,
we're
it
seeing
has
things,
to.
and again, things are just like something, you know, and using words like mindfulness, and I think to me it's very much for people, how you right now, how you label things, or how you try to explain things to people has to be easily digestible in order for them to start whatever path they're supposed to be on,
Well,
or the
it
path
does.
that they're on, and make it understandable.
Yeah, that word doesn't look dangerous.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it could be, I mean, to me, I think that's spot on with the mindfulness aspect, because you see what's going on today, and you have to be careful with the words that you use, and words matter now. And, you know, you need to be careful how you express things, because you don't want to steer people necessarily in the wrong direction. So it could be like Mike was saying, like a gateway drug. I liked how he used that. It's like just giving you a reintroduction into finding yourself so that you can continue on the right path. And it is, I think it's a play with words, because to me, I've seen the mindfulness term used a lot too, Missy. And it's like, for me, it was the same thing. It's just another way of saying, you know, self-awareness. It's just being mindful, and just, yeah, I think that's spot on. So
Yeah, and I think it's easier, and that's why I asked the question too, Carla, is because, you know, when for someone now in 2022 to pick up a book that was written in the 1930s. Was that when this was written? You know, they're like, oh, well, times have changed, and this isn't going to be relative. This isn't going, you know, this isn't going to make any sense, even though it's very much on point and very much, you know, and it's very much what we're going through now. So I just think finding things like mindfulness or finding some sort of gateway to
Right.
back to something that was going on in the 30s, where you can say, oh, you mean this was going on already? You know, like the studies in the 60s and people taking LSD to kind of get to a different stream of consciousness and figure things out, you know, so they're like, oh, you know, they had something there, but they were on drugs, you know. So it's just making, you know, I'm just wondering if some of this mindfulness now is drawing from all of this just to make it more current, to make people say, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Because
Well,
if this was
I
written
got
in the
something for
30s
you.
times, you know, we've been through wars. So people are like, all right, well, you know, life is different now, you know, so this can't be relative. So yeah, go ahead, Don.
That whole realm of mindfulness and other psychologies is a part of the collective consciousness that is able to sway people. So when stuff like that's put in, it does sway the whole collective, starts picking up on those things. The goal is to evolve out of that mass thought processes and become an individual thinker. So is it good that that stuff is there in the collective? Yeah, sure. And as we start talking, I assume we're putting higher or more elevated perspectives into the collective as well, which will also help bust us out of that, you know.
Okay, now I'm gonna go another half page in Annie Besant, and we will probably move out of mindfulness for a moment, okay? In terms of when I'm talking about is more like science fiction. Okay, so we've got her statement, all is separable into the I and the not I, the self and the not self. Now remember, starting with a monadic on that chart on 117, on the top, we are the divine spark. We have come down, now we're working our way back up, but we are creating consciousness, but we're still that divine spark. And we are one. Ultimately, it was all one, right? And then we get all the little extra little sparks, that's us, off of the one, and the one is still there, but it was all one. And don't we hear that statement still? We're all one. Okay, just keep that in mind. And so anyway, so we've got all is separable into the I and the not I. Now this would be our perspectives. Self and the not self. Every separate thing is summed up under one or other of the headings. It's either self or not self. There's nothing which cannot be placed under one of them. Self is life. That's our little divine spark, if you will. Consciousness. And not self is matter and form. Okay. Because remember, we're just dealing with the union of spirit and matter in everything we're doing. Every little conscious, whatever, it's a union of spirit and matter is occurring for us to experience this and create this consciousness. But there needs to be something that holds the glue that holds it all together, or puts it in solution, or however you want to put it. The point is, you had spirit and matter, they were separate already, okay, not doing anything, so to speak, until you have the union, and then you've created something. So the relation between them is continual approach, withdrawal, an identification, a repudiation, because now we're also talking about electromagnetic field, positive and negative. So it's the idea and you come together, and a repudiation, you go apart. This interplay shows itself as the ever-changing universe. Thus, we have a trinity, not a duality, the self, the not self, and the relation between them. All is here summed up, all things, all relations, actual, possible, and hence three, neither more nor less, is the foundation of all universes in their totality, and of each universe in particular. And we, you know, are our own little universe too, even though there's bigger ones than us out there. Okay, but we in a sense can see ourselves as a little universe. This fundamental fact imposes on a logos the triplicity of manifestation in a solar system, and hence the one, the point, going forth in three directions to the circumference of the circle of matter and returning on itself, manifests a different aspect at each place of contact with the circle. And she's working on a circle that is, you're not gonna, this ain't gonna show up. Anyway, she's got the circle with the equilateral triangle in it. If you guys have looked under in her book at all, but that's where she's talking about it comes back and bounces back and forth. So the three fundamental expressions of consciousness are either will, wisdom, or activity that's going on. Now, this is where I want to add that this probably extends it to a little beyond mindfulness. So you have the triad or the trinity. For the universal self, the inner self, thinking of the not self, identifies himself with it, thereby sharing with it his being. And this is the divine activity, the existence lent to the non-existent, the universal mind. So this is where it gets to be a little more like science fiction, in as much as what she's really indicating here is that I give you existence by recognizing you. Okay. And consequently, everybody else does too. And so when they remove that, then you're existent, you no longer exist in that presence. So, I mean, this becomes a mind game. I think the little bottom note here, power, love, and wisdom is another favorite way of expressing the triplicity, but this leaves out activity and duplicates love less, unless love be taken as its equivalent, since love is essentially active. That's more detail, but the bottom line is ultimately it still is all one, whether we have all of us doing this or not. It's all reduced to one in as much as we go out and we recognize something else, that gives it its existence. And when we withdraw that recognition, it goes back to the one. So it ultimately is always all one, but we just experience it as a multiplicity. So then if you want to play another mind game with consciousness, you can indicate that it is all one. It is that monadic essence in all of his little sparks that are out there experiencing it. That one is experiencing all of these, but it's still all one, and it all reduces back to one. Anyway, so I think that takes it out of a little bit of mindfulness, because you can really screw somebody up with that if you can work that one in your head. And that's part of what science, I think, came out with when it started dealing with the quantum and opening up that whole realm of this is how it all gets put together, because it just blew everybody's mind, because they still had Newtonian physics. Everything was stable. And then when the apple fell to the ground, it was going to get a bruise for sure. And maybe it doesn't now. anyway, does that pull it a little further away from the simplicity of mindfulness? I think that is there. I think that's brought there to just get people to focus as to who they are and what they are, because there's nobody else telling them anymore. In other words, the church is not telling you. Church did a good job of telling you, so you got grounded for sure. More ways than one if you didn't believe, so that really defined for people, because it set their moral tone, it set their behavior pattern. All of that was set for us. Nobody's setting that at this point. If anything, people are trying to rip it all apart right now, into all these different versions, which really have to confuse these young.
Well, I think with the church, is trying to bring it all to one. And
I don't think they were, by the way, but anyway, but at
yeah,
least
yeah.
told
I
you
think
who we were.
yeah, but I think part of what's even going on, and I think maybe Donnie and I had that conversation too with the church, is like you're told so much and then you experience something differently. And I think that's why a lot of people have pulled away, or things have happened within different religions, or things are then twisted and manipulated. That is why a lot of people aren't getting that anymore. Even with my child, I'm just like, ugh, do I send her to CCD? Do I know? Like, it was a whole conversation we've been having for a long time about whether or not, because I don't entirely agree with everything that's happening during the homily, during the sermons, because it's you're just like, no, that's so wrong. There, you're disconnecting people, as opposed to you're creating a disconnect, and this illusion of a disconnect, but at the same time trying to preach a connection. So I think that's where people are at, and they're trying to get their way back to that, where they're trying to find it all comes back to one. So maybe.
Well, and I don't think most people are even thinking of that. But
yeah.
Anyway, I'm just saying that ultimately, I mean, this when you start dealing with just the abstract fundamentals of the creation of consciousness, it can be a real mind game.
Yes. And I think that's where people, it's the mind game becomes an intrusion on their life. So they get angry about it and they step away from it. And so, finding our way back onto what's actually happening is a little bit more difficult. And they're trying to, there's, books and books and books and books. Yeah. So I guess just people just trying to find their way. And I think that's where we're at. And little things are helping guide people to learning truth, and that's where we're at, and we're trying to get to it.
Yeah.
There are 1.1 million books in the Vatican Library, and they talk from about 50 pages of one. So that kind of hurts a little bit.
Right. Well, if you think about it, 1.1 million books in the Vatican, but we're only told to focus on the one,
right,
on the
that's
Bible, so
well,
when there's so much more out there, and again, to me, it's about what books resonate with people, because of, again, Mike and Tommy were saying the same thing. Words matter, how things are presented to you matter. So knowing these books are out there could help, versus this is it, this is the only thing you have to go by. That's it, that's all you got to figure out, how this makes sense to you. Makes sense, and it's whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Quran, whether it's the Torah, exactly. You know, you need the supplement, you need the other things to help you understand, because everybody, you know, in my line of work, everybody learns differently. You either learn through experience, you learn through reading, you learn through somebody else. You know, how people learn is so different. So how things need to be presented are different. So these books, these 1.1 million books, or some of them are dissecting the one book, you know, and I think it's important that, you know, and that's why we're coming back. And when you're going through this, and even Donnie, you said, you know, when you go back to this book, you have to go back a couple of times. Even when we talk about it, Carla, we have to go back and reread it and see, because it comes back to us differently.
Right.
So yeah, so there's just so much out there, and sometimes it may be overwhelming. And some people give up on that, I think.
Well, and you've got to remember too, that Christianity was built on the age of Pisces, the last 2,600 years or thereabouts. And it's now leaving. We are moving, our solar system is moving over to a different backdrop with a different energetic feed, and the energetic feed is science. Okay, so, but as it leaves that backdrop of Pisces, all of the energy that was utilized and we interacted with for all of that period of time is leaving. That is the real waning of Christianity, is the energy that whole system was built with is now moving off. And the new energy is coming in to build with, but it's by no means coming in fully formed. So it'll take about 1,500 years to get it to basically where it's going to have a good formation, where you get a grip of it. But it's the transition is also what's going on. So it's an end of one age, the beginning of another. And so we're just right, you know, on the edge of that. And he wrote these books to be most useful at the beginning of the year 2000 when he put them out. It was with that intent. So we're just starting to get there. And you can just bet your bottom dollar that people who have a longer viewpoint of what they're going to do and how it's going to fall in place have looked at those astrology charts and the backdrops and when the changing of the age is, and when there's a whole nother set of stuff that's ray structures and all that, which we're not dealing with here right now. And when those rays come in and out, because all of those are data feeds to us, and we're just the little receivers. And we're going to receive what comes, because that's just the way it is. You know, we don't have that many channels coming into this system. I'm back on Treatise and White Magic for a minute. So the soul, the macrocosm, microcosm, I'm on the bottom of 34, universal and human, is that entity which is brought into being when the aspects spirit and matter are related to each other. That's how we create it. The soul, therefore, is neither spirit nor matter, but the relation between the two, which we've talked about. The soul is the mediator between the duality. It is the middle principle, the link between God and his form, life, spirit, and matter. Therefore, the soul is another name for the Christ principle, whether it is nature or in man. In other words, this is the second solar system. It's producing consciousness. What we call consciousness is that relating principle between the two. The soul is the attractive force of created universe and holds all forms together so that the life of God may manifest or express itself through them. So that's why we have a solid planet, I guess. Therefore, the soul is the form building aspect and is that attractive factor in every form in the universe. in the planet, in the kingdoms of nature, and in man, who sums himself up in all aspects, which brings the form into being, which enables it to develop. And so, I mean, there's where we are the gracious, conscious creator here, in terms of man who sums up in himself all the aspects, which brings the form into being, enables it to develop and grow so as to house more adequately the indwelling life, and which drives all God's creatures forward along the path of evolution through one kingdom or another towards an eventual goal and a glorious consummation. So when you talk about developing, growing, etc., and he makes a comment about there is no life on the moon because there are no conscious creators or on the moon. In other words, there was at one point in time, and then they were removed from the moon, in the moon chain, I guess, and that's why there's no life there. If you had, again, the developmental life forms we have on this planet, the kingdoms of which we are the synthetic result of all of that, and we are the creating consciousness. That's why we have the life and we have the aspects of creation, etc., that we have on this planet. And if you took all of the conscious creating machinery off of this planet, you wouldn't be creating all of this that we have. The soul is the force of evolution itself. So there's your driver. And this was in the mind of St. Paul when he spoke, Christ in you, the hope of glory. The soul manifests differently in various kingdoms of nature, but its function is ever the same, whether we are dealing with an atom of substance and its power to preserve its identity and form, carrying forward its activity along its own line, or whether we deal with a form in one of the three kingdoms of nature, held coherently together, demonstrating characteristics, pursuing its own instinctual life, and working as a whole towards something higher and better. Therefore, the soul is that which gives distinct characteristics, differing forms of manifestation. That's why everybody is different. It's a result of that soul. The soul plays upon matter, forcing it to assume certain shapes, to respond to certain vibrations, to build those specified phenomenal forms which we recognize in the world of the physical plane as mineral, vegetable, animal, human, and for the initiate, other forms as well. Those are everything on your chart above where the soul rides on that page 117. The qualities, vibrations, colors, characteristics in all the kingdoms of nature are soul qualities, as are the latent powers in any form seeking expression and demonstrating potentiality. In their sum total, at the close of the evolutionary period, they will reveal what is the nature of divine life and of the world soul. And of course, at the end, they will reveal the nature of the divine life, because you would have evolved all the way back up to the top, the whole system. And then we're back to the divine fully developed again after it's gone through its route down and back up. And they will, and that oversoul, which is the revealing character of God. But consciousness will have been created. Therefore, the soul, through these qualities and characteristics, manifests as conscious response to matter. For the qualities are brought into being through the interplay of the pairs of opposites, spirit and matter, and their effect on each other. That is the basis of consciousness. And so, that soul has synthesized over eons of time those interactions we've had, and what we call qualities, that's what determines the qualities. In other words, the assessment of the quality of somebody is that synthetic process of putting together all those experiences and then having a quality about it, what we recognize as a quality. But that is the basis of consciousness, is the interplay of spirit and matter and their effect on each other. And it's all collected, obviously, in the soul. It doesn't escape, nothing escapes. The soul is the consciousness factor in all forms and source of that awareness which all forms register, and that responsiveness to surrounding group conditions, which forms the kingdoms in nature. Therefore, the soul might be defined as that significant aspect in every form made through spirit and matter, which feels, registers, awareness, attracts and repels, responds or denies response, and keeps all forms in a constant condition of vibratory activity. The soul is the perceiving entity produced through the union of spirit and matter. And so basically, when we talk about the 3 in 1, because that soul is that perceiving entity, it's the relation between the two. And it's the union, it's the relation between them, but it is the perceiving entity. So it's the one that holds this whole thing together and has the consciousness to perceive, the awareness to perceive whatever it is that's going on. The soul is, that's a long one, so let's see, because I know we've gone through this. Number 5, the soul of the universe is, for the sake of clarity, capable of differentiation, or rather owing to the limitations of form through which the soul has to function, capable of recognition at differing rates of vibration and stages of development. So that's the big kahuna, the soul of the universe. The soul nature in the universe therefore manifests in certain great states of awareness, which many intermediate conditions of which the major are enumerated as consciousness or state of awareness in matter itself, due to the fact that the mother matter has been, went through this before. I can't pronounce that word, but it is made union with the Father, the Spirit. Thus life and matter have been brought together. This type of consciousness concerns the atom, the molecule, the cell of which all forms are constructed, thus the form of the solar system, of a planet, and of all that's been found on it within a planet's produced. So we're obviously connecting consciousness and soul together in terms of, and having a certain synonymous pairing according to his material, for starters. Intelligent, sentient consciousness is the evidence in the mineral and the vegetable kingdoms. This is responsible for quality, shape, coloring of the vegetable mineral forms and their specific natures. And if you've ever looked at the charts in chemistry, these elements know who they want to partner up with and who they don't. They know where they want to go. So when he's talking about the intelligent, sentient consciousness, especially in the mineral kingdom, or how these elements are going to pair, they already know. So that's a very basic conscious awareness that's there. Animal consciousness is awareness of the soul response in all forms in the animal kingdom, producing their distinctions and species. And now we get to ourselves here. Human consciousness or self-consciousness, towards which the development of the life, the form, and the awareness in the 3 other kingdoms is gradually tended. This term concerns the individual consciousness of man, and in the early stages is more animal than divine, owing to the dominance of the animal body with its instincts and tendencies. This morning, Donnie and I had a conversation because he was dealing with good and evil, and I just see that as a matter of timing. What we determine is good or evil, and as much as using this term here, this term concerns individual consciousness of man, and in the early stages is more animal than divine. and owing to the dominance of the animal body, its instincts and its tendencies, and as Blavatsky defines man as an animal plus a god. So the battle here is, as you move out of that animal consciousness, which has been a long journey, okay, whatever we've advanced up the chart a little bit, where our value systems move away from just basic animal processes that is normal for an animal, that is the line of good and evil in terms of, do we keep going upward? Okay, because it's certainly, we've changed our qualities of behavior versus what is what 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, because we are moving in that direction. Now, when we backtrack, okay, and we start regressing into those earlier patterns, which probably had less respect for men, one to another, less respect for life on the whole planet, for that matter, so on and so forth. It is counterproductive to man's evolutionary pattern going forward, and it's counterproductive to the planet that is evolving. So if you go too far back in regression as an overall of the human kingdom, it would be a defeat for the planet. It appears that that has probably happened once or twice that we know of in our recorded history. Once we had, he indicates with Lemuria, it was actually a volcanic activity that, and then the island they were on sunk. Okay, and that's, it's in our history, but the flood is, which was the Atlantis for the Atlantis itself, Atlantean, that flood is in your Bible. So you've got that one where, and I think wasn't the reason for the flood was getting rid of the people who were not, who are considered evil or whatever. Who read the book? Who read the Old Testament? Why was there a flood?
Gotta start over.
Yeah, because the decision making of the general populace evidently was not going to go in the direction that this planet needed to go. And we literally are a planetary issue. You know, we are here to serve the purpose of the planet. And like I keep saying, not just to pick up the garbage that we've thrown around, but we have our purpose is to create that consciousness. It is to evolve. It is to, I think he indicates somewhere in one of these books that it's to become a fully conscious unit, literally like a cellular structure in the planet. And when fully conscious, then I would expect that he's talking about up to that monadic level, and that is the place where humanity is meant to go and develop in that direction. If you get too much of a backward development, if you get a U-turn and humanity who is in the lead in creating consciousness does a U-turn and decides to go back and act like more of its animal nature, or less value system for life in all its aspects. But now from the human perspective, yeah, you're going to get flushed. And I would imagine this planet would do it again.
What you said this morning, Carla, I don't mean to cut you off, but what you said to me earlier about as we move up, those aspects no longer have the same sway on us as they had before. And that relation, that's really huge if you.
Yeah, and that's what's meant to occur. And if you're going down this initiatory path that he talks about, the one that's been trod by humanity for a long time. And that's what all these books are about, is moving in that direction and being consciously aware that you're doing it, because that was not conveyed in Christianity like it should have been. He demonstrated all of those first 5 initiations, but you know, the church said, oh, don't worry about that, we'll do it for you, we'll take care of you. But I'm just saying, if it makes a U-turn, if the collective generalized body, obviously what he took Noah and his family and some animals, right, on this ark, he wasn't saving too many, but he never talks about the Chinese. So I don't know what happened with the Chinese, because they're not in our Bible. Okay. But I think they went that direction eventually, supposedly, one of the sons at least. Anyway, but the point I'm making is, if we really went south again, so to speak, as a collective humanity, and turned around and decided to subvert the natural evolutionary pattern that's meant for humanity to go to serve our purpose for this planet and follow our evolutionary path. If we did a U-turn and come back down, evidently at least twice historically, there's been a blowout of that group and a restart, you know. So, and he does indicate in Cosmic Fire, supposedly page 242, oh, it might be the note on the bottom even, anyway, that the earth is the turning point between spirit and matter. Man's importance on earth is he is the place where that turning point occurs between spirit and matter, and you start to move upward and move into being, evolving those upper levels that are formless, you know. So I'm talking Buddhic plane and above, the spiritual triad, making a connection with that. That's the direction we're meant to go. If we turned around and said, oh, well, forget the soul, let's just go back and do what we did back here, you know, because it's fun. It's, you know, in fact, I think I've heard it mentioned, somebody mentioned, they said, look, there's a lot of people on this planet now, they don't want to go reincarnate and keep developing and keep doing that process. They want to short circuit that. They just want to figure out how to keep this body alive forever. You know, by plugging it into chips or figuring out how to, you know, make a new hand or, you know, renew the body so that they can stay in place, but never go that route. We don't want to keep doing that, because then they might come back as somebody who's got to go do all this again. So let's see if we can just kind of put everything in park at this point in time, in terms of forgetting that process. We'll just figure out how to live from today on, which will not function. I mean, that will not work well. It's, in other words, the organic process of this planet has purpose, and that creating of that consciousness has a purpose, but it's meant to move you on up that chart so that the consciousness that you're going to experience evolves into other dimensions and capabilities, which is what that chart that I had Donnie do today is meant to do. You're not supposed to pull the plugs out now or put the plugs in and say, okay, we're not growing any further. This is a great planet that, you know, we'll probably reduce the population or something, but with a little you know, a little elimination of some of the place, this will be a great place to live for whoever can figure out how to live forever. you know, I don't think the
Robots.
planets buy that. Huh? Say that
Except
again.
for the robots.
Yeah. Or for something. I mean, and I don't think this planet's going to buy it.
Right. It's like the planet is self-governing, right? When it knows something
believe-
is going wrong and we're heading in the wrong direction, it's just going to wipe out what it needs to wipe out so we can have the reset and continue on the right path. I do have a question though,
Yeah.
and it backtracks a little bit. But talking about this, because so when you talked earlier about how we're moving into the Aquarian age, and that's going to be more scientific based.
Mhm.
But here we're talking about, and we see, and I feel like the way these scientific and technological advancements are going, it almost seems like some people are trying to steer us towards what you were just talking about, like living forever and downloading our brains into AI and things like that. So how do we strike that balance if we're supposed to be moving into this age that's scientific, but we have this scientific community that's with us now that seems to think that the advancements there are these things that aren't really what we're supposed to be doing? So how do we ensure that we're kind of heading in the right direction? I mean, it's probably what we're all doing here right now is what everyone needs to be doing, but it seems like there's a huge population that is just heading in this other direction.
Yeah, it's the battle.
Yeah.
It's the battle that's being done now. And in fact, this is when he talks about Earth is the turning point between spirit and matter. In other words, this planet, because we deal with matter, you can see some of the other planets in this particular solar system are not dealing with things that are in a state of matter the way we are. You know, Venus, it's what, 843 degrees. It's got a methane coating around it, you know, et cetera, et cetera. That's a different element of matter. They're at a different evolutionary state, actually. But we right here are that battleground. And we're also what, the fourth planet? We're supposed to represent the heart center in the solar system as an entity. If you think of the chakras for the human being, then just lay it over, and it's a larger unit within a larger unit. Well, if we yeah, so if all of a sudden they want to put the brakes, humanity's gotten to a point where it wants to put the brakes on, say, hey, we don't want to go any further than this, and we're not necessarily interested in populating this planet with all of these bodies. Okay, which means an elimination of the activity of creation of consciousness, right? In reality, and so on and so forth. So we want to change the pattern of growth and development on this planet to better suit what we think it should be. I don't think the planet will not function well that way, because it's not meant to function that way. He will say here, and this is an advanced piece of material for what we're talking about. He indicates that this planet has already done the fifth initiation subjectively. Okay, the fifth is fairly well advanced. All right, it's not the ultimate. There's 9 of them to go total. So at 5, you're going to start to move more into a spiritual path than you've been at 5 than you were at 4, or that you were at 3, but that it hasn't done the objective side of that fifth initiation. Okay, obviously we know subjective is within us, objective is our outer part. And so I expect that, and I expect that to take a long time. I don't think that's not a flash in the pan. Let's hope not, or it'll be a real flash. But that the physical has to change on the outside, and some adjustments, and they'll be made. But I'm not suggesting that the plans people have here to change things physically is representative of a fifth initiation, which is really moving into a spiritual world, because some of these plans are meant to stop that. You know, they don't want to go through that route. And he will indicate in his material that you can have the most brilliant scientist or brilliant person who has no clue that they even have a soul. Okay. Or that, and have no intentions of going down that pattern, because they haven't been routed there. They've just bypassed that, or for the moment are focused elsewhere. So I would expect that you have a number of people on this planet who, as they get brighter and they start to see the way everything is put together, oh, well, we can change this and that and do, and think that they can do it. But it would wither. You know, you would have parts that would wither if you start making changes like that. And if you decide to go back to behavior that was acceptable eons ago, that would be counterproductive to where we are today.
Yeah, it's like we have to tread very, very carefully for this evolution, because people can interpret evolution in so many different ways, and it's very, very fine-tuned which evolution I think we're supposed to really be heading towards. You can find yourself going down the wrong path pretty easily if you're not careful.
Yeah, no, it's very easy to be what would be the right word for me? I mean, you know, to be sucked in to some of the stuff you see. I mean, I've seen people, they've seen some of the new material, the new ideas, oh, well, that would be great. And we can even evolve machinery. Machinery can have a little involvement too. I mean, oh, come on. This is not the plans of this planet. I mean, you know, there's an organic growth, and we are certainly part of that organic growth, but we're meant to grow. We're meant to evolve. The driver is there. And so to turn around and debase humanity, that would probably be the best direction, best word to indicate the direction, to debase humanity, because that would be a debasement. This planet would not do well, organically would not do well. And so something would happen. And I mean, and who knows all the little nuances that would come up that would be dysfunctional in the game plan they have to live forever. And you know, if we go to astrology for a minute, you've got a life pattern, you've got a purpose, and you've got a plan. Basically, that's really what that is the soul has decided it's time to build a little more consciousness, you know, partake in the work again, if you will, of evolving the planet. But so you're coming down here, there's an objective, whatever the synthetic analysis of that whole synthesis of your experiences that's in that consciousness and that soul, there is a purpose to either enhance it over here or expand it over there, or whatever the life pattern is for. And so you get your personality profile to work with, and you'll get those transits. I mean, that is your purpose and your plan. You are plugged in, you are logged in for that given lifetime, for that block of time, and with that set of cycles. And then you can take a breather again, literally, you know, and get a little bit of rest. So to turn around then and to try to plug somebody in perpetuity, would be extremely dysfunctional also. Because you can't, first of all, I don't think you would perfect the body to a point where if you're going for year 100 to year 200, that you would be up and running organically well enough to do a whole nother set of transits and cycles that would be beneficial. I don't see that yet. So the whole idea would be very dysfunctional, but I think it's also based on some real debased emotional interactions and happenings and everything else. It's there's nothing highly evolved about that game plan that appears to be out there. So it's a matter of people standing up. Now there's three things, and I'm probably not going to get to, there's three words you're going to start hearing this year because of Pluto, conjunct Pluto in the United States planet. We're dealing with the Constitution. We're dealing with all that. You're going to see sovereignty or a sovereign being a terminology that's going to show up. You will have, there's three of them if I've got them. Another one is authentic. Some people have a certain degree of searching themselves personally for their own authenticity. You're going to find that on authenticity, I think, in the chart itself. That will align with your chart, who you are, your own authenticity for this life will be reflected there. Your sovereignty is going to show up because the Constitution is going to be questioned. And our Constitution, probably the only one on the planet that has been written to protect your relationship all the way up to that, in that chart 117 of up to your monadic being, your sovereign being, your little chip off the old block, however you want to look at it, the divine spark, whatever, that this country, this land mass was dedicated to each individual being able to experience and recognize and be respected for their sovereign being without having a monarchy or someone else being put in place, which most of your European countries were, where you had the sovereignty was the king, the queen, the emperor, the whatever. But the individual had no real rights of his own. So when this Constitution was written for this landmass, the respect, it pulled the monarch out, being the king, the queen, the emperor, and it places each individual who's got their feet on this land to be respected for their own sovereign being. And that's who they are beholden to, is God, if you will, or that upper part of themselves. And that's who they're working in union with. And so you will see that those things bantied around this time in this next 9 months, and in various ways. But it's going to become an issue of who do we have our allegiance to. And and that'll be why, and that's the timing of it. It's already started. There's some people who I think around the planet, not just the United States, are filing some form of that sovereign recognition, but I'm not that aware. I know it's occurring. I don't know any details about it, nor am I suggesting anybody pursue that. I just know that it's out there. But that's the battle. And again, if that is the battle that he says here, as Earth is, for man's importance, is his place in that battle, that's right where we are in that chart. When you get to 117, is we are the ones who can move up onto that Buddhic plane where we're right on the 4th level, which is 3 up, 3 down. And do you have your little arrow, Donnie? All right, so your Buddhic plane is plane number 4, and that's the one where we can go there, and then that's where we start to develop formless, becoming conscious on formless levels. And you know, and we have etheric, this planet has a lot of, you know, obviously etheric levels also. So we're the ones in that battle, and I suppose to some extent a little bit of that battle will be fought this round in this country, about our sovereign importance, and that it's us and our creator that we owe our allegiance to. It's not somebody who's put in the middle, in the same way the church was in the middle. So were the monarchs. You know, I don't think you could do anything. In earlier monarch days, you could not do anything without approval of the monarch. You know, period. Those were all decisions that were made for you. And so the real importance of the United States in that document and that Constitution was it gave each individual rights on their own without being beholden to somebody else as the intermediary.
Seems like we've fallen off that track a little bit, though.
It would seem like it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, sure, we are perceived to have freedoms, but there's always a cost associated with that, or a repercussion if you make the wrong free will choice. So
Yeah, right now.
yeah,
But I think what's going to do is they're going to look back on the research of what initially transpired and the way things were when they started,
right.
and going to review that and probably have some discussion, dialogue, and awareness, because it is lost
Mhm.
at this point. We're actually, I think, not constitutional anymore. I think we're corporate.
Mhm.
So, you know,
Absolutely.
yeah, and so that'll have to be reviewed. But it's got between now and next December, this transit, you know, it was February to December. So those things I think will surface, and you're certainly going to see them as becoming more issues. But they are relative to exactly what we are talking about, is what I'm saying. And they're relative to that chart, and the fact that that's where we need to go, and that's what our Constitution was directed to protect, was that relationship to that point. I'm probably almost to 39. I'm still with later, as far as the human consciousness or self-consciousness. And then it says later, it's more strictly human, us, neither purely animal nor entirely divine, fluctuating between 2 stages, thus making the human kingdom the great battleground between the pairs of opposites, between the urge or pull of the spirit and the lure of matter or mother nature, and between that called the lower self and the spiritual man. So that's your answer, Donnie, really, to good and evil is right there. Is it's just so I'm saying the goalpost moves as humanity as a whole moves up that chart. Then what was considered good or normal or whatever, and we move up, then to regress to that point is destructive or evil. So the point always, it moves. The farther up we go, then whatever's below it will be looked at as something that we should not make the choice of, or we would determine was. So it's a matter of time, in a sense, for us who, if you're functioning in time, then it's a matter of time. If that makes any sense, Donnie?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about, it's time, you got to build an ark.
Gotta build it. Now, it
and you
won't be,
gotta,
I know how to
Yeah.
sail.
but the thing
gotta
is,
get out of the astral waters of the astral plane.
it can be, but interestingly enough, the first one had to do with level 7, which was the volcano, because that is that arena. The level 6 was the astral, and that was the water, and that was Noah's Ark. So this one would have to be some battle on the mental plane and some factor of that. So we'll
Some
see what
fire.
happens. Yeah, although, well, anyway, I'm not going to get into the details of what that could be, because I don't want to really entertain that concept at this point in time. We'll obviously see battles, but they're going to be battles of the mind. I mean, it's, do you persuade people this, or do you persuade them that? Whether you use, and we're what's considered kama manasic, which means we are not pure mental thinkers. We are moving off the astral plane, but the bottom lower mental is blended between your emotional thoughts attached to your mental thinking. So, we're not pure mental at this point in time. And like I said, the Buddhic plane number 4 is considered the plane of pure reason. Which is interesting, because and look, when you get to the logos, you got the word logoic is very closely aligned as far as a word goes. So and logic, and those words all represent something. So there's interesting patterns here that we're just starting to get into, that actually probably have a high degree of rationality to them. But now, if I can, let's go look at the group consciousness section, and then I want to look at the charts that I had Donnie put together to make a point of, after all, if we're going to do this journey, we've got to figure out how we could possibly do it. And the point I want to make is we have a lot of the equipment. We just have to know we have it. We come completely equipped to do what we're supposed to be doing for this planet. A lot of human side trips, that's something else, the journeys that people can dream up. So group consciousness, which is the consciousness of the great sum totals, is arrived at by man through the development, first of all, of his individual consciousness, the sum total of the lives of his animal, emotional, and mental natures, plus the spark of divinity dwelling within the form which they make. Then comes awareness of his group, as specified for him in that group of disciples working under some one master who represents to him the hierarchy. The hierarchy might be defined as the sum total of those sons of men who are no longer centered in the individualized self-consciousness, but who have entered into a wider realization, that of the planetary group life. There are stages in this realization mounting all the way from that tiny group recognition of the probationary disciple up to the completed group awareness of the life in whom all forms have their being, the consciousness of the planetary logos, that spirit before the throne, who manifests through the form of a planet as man manifests through his form in the human kingdom. The soul, therefore, may be regarded as the unified sentiency, the relative awareness of that which lies back of the form of a planet and of a solar system. These latter are the sum total of all forms, organic or inorganic, as the materialist differentiates them. The soul, though constituting one great total, is, however, limited in its expression by the nature and the quality of the form in which it is found. And there are consequently forms which are highly responsive to and expressive of the soul, and others which, owing to their density and the quality of the atoms of which they are composed, are incapable of recognizing the higher aspects of the soul or of expressing more than its lower vibration, tone, or color. The infinitely small is recognized and the infinitely vast is assumed, but it remains as yet a concept until such time as the consciousness of man is inclusive as well as exclusive. This concept will be understood when the second aspect is contacted. Men understand the nature of the soul. It must also be remembered that just as the basic triplicity of manifestation worked out symbolically in man as his quota of energy, his nervous system, and the body mass, so the soul can be known as a triplicity, the higher correspondence of the lower. There is, first of all, what may be called the spiritual will, that quota of the universal will which any one soul can express, and which is adequate for the purposes of enabling the spiritual man to cooperate in the plan and the purpose of the great life in which he has his being. Now, that's the little, he's talking about the great life and the plan and the purpose of the planet. Because I use those terms when I talk to you about your own little chart and your transits and plan and purpose. Okay, but this one is a grander plan and purpose that he's talking about, that I just wanted to draw that distinction. There's also the second soul quality, which is spiritual love, the quality of group consciousness, of inclusiveness, of mediatorship, of attraction, and of unification. This is the paramount soul characteristic, for only the soul has it as the dynamic factor. And it would if it contains all of consciousness, right? The spirit or monad is primarily the expression of will with love and intelligence as secondary principles. So whenever you talk about the spirit, you are generally, or the monad, you are talking about if you had a ray quality, you would consider it a first ray quality type of thing because of the will. It's primarily the expression of will with love and intelligence as secondary principles because they have to be developed. The first part of the system developed the intelligence. In other words, it created intelligent matter that could, okay. The second part of this three-part system is the one we're in now. The second one, which is creating love. And if you literally abstract love to a scientific principle of a creation of union of a positive and a negative, then you have the creation of consciousness by spirit and matter. So it's there are secondary principles. The body, nature, the personality is paramountly distinguished by intelligence, but the soul has the quality of love, which demonstrates as wisdom, also when the intelligence of the body nature is fused with the love of the soul. The following tabulation may make the thought clearer. you got monad, will, and purpose. First aspect is will, enabling the monad to participate in the universal purpose. Number 2, love, the energy which is poured forth into the soul, making it what it is the second aspect of the monad. Third aspect is intelligence, transmitted via the soul and brought into manifestation through the medium of the body. And then we have the soul. The first aspect is will. It's held in abeyance, but expressing itself through the mind aspect of the personality and through Kundalini, which, when aroused correctly, makes possible the final initiations into the consciousness of the monad. And the will is held in abeyance in this system until it is in its third system, its own system. It is for the most part held in abeyance, and every part of what they consider the will is held in the second aspect in this second solar system. And they're basically saying if you had the will direct in this system, you'd just blow the whole thing up. You know, I mean, we unleash the will in the center of the atom, and you see what we got. You know, a lot of energy that we're not ready for on this planet when we blew up Japan. So the second aspect, and we are in the second system, if you will, developmental love, the dominating force of the soul life. Through this possession, this type of energy, the soul can be in rapport with all souls. Sure, because you're all in consciousness. Through the emotional body, the soul can be in touch with all animal or subhuman souls through its work on its own plane with the mediating souls of all men, and through the principle of Buddhi with the second aspect of the monad. And then we have the third aspect of the is knowledge. This aspect's brought into touch with the intelligence of all cells in the threefold body mechanism. By a close study of the above, it becomes apparent in what ways the soul acts as the mediator between the monad and the personality. The personality hides within itself as a casket hides the jewel, that point of soul light, which we call the light in the head. This is found within the brain. It is only discovered and later used when the highest aspects of the personality, the mind, is developed and functioning. Then the union with the soul is made, and the soul functions through the lower personal nature. The soul hides within itself as the jewel in the lotus, that faculty of dynamic energy, which is manifested attribute of the monad or the will. When the soul has unfolded all its powers and has learned to include within its consciousness all that is connotated by the myriad of forms that being takes, then in turn higher, more inclusive state becomes possible. The soul life is superseded by the monadic life. And so it's the fourth initiation, which is the destruction of the causal body, in other words, the soul. And you give it up because you don't need it anymore. And then what happens is it is superseded, the soul life is superseded by the monadic life, because the monadic life is taken over at that point. So if you had your charts, that would be what would happen. This involves an ability to know, to love, to participate in the plans of a life which has the power to include within its radius of consciousness not only the sum total of the lives and consciousness of the life of the logos on our planet, but all the lives and consciousness within our solar system. This nature of this awareness is only possible of comprehension by the man who has arrived at soul knowledge. That's the third initiation, by the way. The great need at this time is for experts in the life of the soul, and for a group of men or women who, undertaking the great experiment and transition, add their testimony to the truth of the statements of the mystics and the occultists of the ages. So let's look at that chart for just a minute, Donnie, the big one. All right, so if you get your little arrow and go down to where the let's look at where the soul is, and then where we are, which is mental, and we're basically that mental unit, because isn't that level number 4 where the circle, the little dotted line? Yeah. Okay. We've reached that point, but we see the gap, and that's what they talk about, building the anacorona, the bridge. We have to build a bridge. If you're happy just sitting here twiddling your thumbs and living just a normal life, then you don't have to do anything. You just live this one and kick the bucket and live a few more probably, and eventually that gap that's there now in the mental realm between that and the soul, which is just up, we're short just one level at this point, will have been filled in by humanity in general, just like the line below, all of the line that's below that has been filled in, and we built all that over this period of time to get even up to where we are in terms of just most everybody who is born, has got some grasp of some mental aspect. He's got his physical, he's got his emotional world, and he's got some mental capabilities. We as a collective have built ourselves and advanced ourselves up that way. And that's part of what that twin dimensions really talks about in depth, is giving us a grip and an idea of the development of our senses. Because when you've got a physical body, you're not gonna interact with anything without your senses. That's how you interact with whatever else is out there beyond you, is through your sensory apparatus. That's what these little charts on the other side are all about. And so the third initiation here is when you have consciously, and here you're back to consciousness, when you have in full consciousness made a connection with your soul. So you're doing a meet and greet, and there is a transference of the consciousness that's been collected in the soul, is basically, I believe, the way they put it, to you directly now, as part of that third initiation. But by the same token, you make a connection also with that Buddhic permanent atom and the you're going up to the Buddhic one and the Atmic one, all through, and the mental physical atom. That triangle, during that process, after you have interacted with the soul, you and I guess you probably got a pretty good grip on building that line of light at that point, because you, in that process of that one, evidently you make contact with the permanent atoms on the mental level, which is up 2 more little jumps, and then up to the top of the Buddhic plane, which is the second point in that triangle, and then briefly the Atmic plane, way up high. So now you've got a connection, and you will start developing awareness on those levels. It's a slow feed. In fact, DK mentions even as tenuous as the thread is, he indicates on that atmic plane, that spiritual plane, not the equilateral triangle, but that middle triangle, that upper one, the thread is very tenuous, but the point being that you made the contact, so you had the connection, because those lines of little light that you've drawn that contact you with those 3 permanent atoms, then hooks you up, so that because you haven't given up a body at this point, you've just made connections with the third to the soul, transferred the consciousness, but then connected with the little line of light that comes from you. And so now you've been hooked up, so to speak, if you will. You're gonna most likely come back, I would think, on the third. You don't die yet, if you're gonna die. And you start having a slow feed of that energy becoming conscious in your brain, but part of it you won't be aware of functioning to begin with, because your brain can't hook it up and you aren't fully conscious up there yet. But that's the next major goal once you've made it to the soul level. You first of all, before any of that, before the soul has any interest in you whatsoever, you need to have yourself in order down here in this life, where the personality, meaning the physical, the emotional, and the mental bodies that you have, are functioning and operating as a single unit. So so you have control literally of them. So if you're thinking something, your emotional thoughts are not dragging you off in some other direction, and physically you know that you are off in a total different direction than that. It has to be, they all have to be able to operate as one unit, one idea, one intent. Soul doesn't have any interest in you until you can do that. It doesn't even want to have a connection with you. And part of what he indicates is because that soul has access, obviously, to energy a little more highly enlightened than you are at the moment when you're functioning down here on these lower levels. If you're totally out of sorts on all 3 of those, then those parts are going in different directions. Then any energy that would be feeding downward would just make your misalignment and being out of a line even worse. And he indicates it would probably take a few lifetimes to straighten that out. So until you operate as one integrated unit of the lower 3 bodies, the soul doesn't even look in your direction. It might have indicated it was time to incarnate, but it's not paying any attention to you. Because the soul is really the initiate. The soul is the one who's looking to move up. You got to remember, your 2 lower bodies are unprincipled matter anyway that aren't going anywhere. Those are the playpens down there. You're just learning stuff. But until you hit the mental plane and can really function well on the mental plane, you know, you're just in kindergarten. So how do we get here? In other words, there's a lot of talk about, be it initiations, be it evolving, so on and so forth. Well, how does one do that? And that's where these other charts come in. And let me see if I can get them big enough. And again, it's one of the things about twin dimensions, because he really elaborates on how we developed our senses. Because for every, yeah, that's good. So for every plane, you know, because we've got 5 senses, and so there's 5 subplanes on each plane that have the capacity to function through each of those senses. So in other words, on the physical plane, it's obviously apparent we've all pretty much got it. We know that there's hearing and touch and sight and taste and smell. Those are basically our 5 senses. And on the physical plane, they're pretty much what we expect. But we function well with our hearing, our touch, pretty much so. Sight seems to be pretty well developed, but taste and smell, which are the 2 higher levels of the physical plane, we still have a lot of, you know, you got a wine taster. Those are probably really developing that discernment on level number 4. And smell, you can smell certain things, but it's generally not highly developed either to what it can be. And then when you get to the astral plane, which is the plane of the emotions, but it's also a certain degree of sensory evaluation. You've got clairaudience, which is hearing. This one must be going. No, that's touch. Okay, it's the same level where it says gaseous, first etheric, superetheric, subatomic, and atomic levels on the physical. Then it appears to be the same with the astral, which clairaudience is you're hearing things. Psychometry is you're touching something and you get its history because you touch it. Clairvoyance is you'll see something in your mind's eye. You're emotionally, you'll see something. Imagination is second level, and emotional idealism is first, which would be quite advanced for emotional stuff. Mental, now he's got all 7 levels developing. Higher clairaudience is you're hearing again, but on a higher note. You're sensing what's going on. Psychometry, you would be sensing what's going on for the planet. And higher clairvoyance is planetary discrimination. Is those are worlds of form, and then he's got the 3 worlds of formless. Spiritual discernment, and then his upper 2 are response to group vibration and spiritual telepathy. And that, so a lot of times what happens is, obviously we deal, the physical ones are pretty well developed. The astral ones, some people have more highly developed senses than others. Okay, so sometimes you get somebody who's really super psychic, is functioning on one of those levels, whichever one it is. Or my teacher, my mentor, when it came to psychometry, she would be able to take, people would bring her something and she'd want a ring or something and want to know the history of it. And she, when she would touch it, would be able to get the history. because she had that piece of information. She could read that and gain that information. And clairvoyance, you're seeing things that may be out there. I suppose they have some of these who have clairvoyance who, if there's been a criminal activity or something, they may be able to read the pattern and get back to the original stuff. Mental is developing. Now your Buddhic is where you're going to get some healing if you've got somebody who can actually heal and see, because now you're in the formless realm, you're on level number 4. But what will happen is, and then they look at it from the viewpoint of hearing, the chart over on the far side, where before it was all 5 of them and then each level. Now they take the first sense, the second, so hearing, and then it goes through those 5 very clearly. So a lot of times what happens is, I hear this happen every once in a while with some of I got some students I've known for a long time who don't really want to develop these realms. They just can't go there. Okay. They can't study this material. It just can't make it into their being. So we will talk about this or that more often than not this spiritual stuff. They really aren't interested, but what's going on at work and what is happening and this and that. And I'll make remarks or responses, and then he'll come back and say, how did you know that? I was here all the time. I've been in all these meetings, so on and so forth. And I never saw any of this. And you weren't around at all. And you told me exactly what was happening. Well, that's because as you develop through these different levels, you start to develop the more sensitive, or however you want to put it, the different levels. You aren't just dealing with your physical. You're getting fed information because those senses you have, of which there's 5, but they each have 5 levels of development. So that's where the information starts to come from. Yeah, I see Donnie. I really wasn't talking about you, Donnie. I was
No,
talking.
I'm looking at this chart on the right. Actually, as you're saying it, that starts to make quite a bit of sense as you're talking about it. The one all the way to the far right. You can I can see what you're saying in front of me, actually. I mean,
well, which is okay. So I guess we got the same right side if we're looking at it, right? Yeah. And that's what happens is because you start pulling on, yes, the information is obvious, but then these other levels start getting developed, like within the physical hearing. Okay. And you get another set of information. Nobody else necessarily gets it, but you get it. And it comes to you. And so now it's in your body of knowledge and awareness that you have that somebody else just doesn't have because they're not functioning on those levels. If those levels of those sensories have not been developed. That's why when you get to the astral, you're going to have some good psychics. There'll be some real ones will have developed on that level, and they will be able to have that information where most people don't. And just like when you get to the mental one and you hit realization, That would be the most advanced. Yeah, you might, if you're developing in this realm, then the time will come somewhere along the line where, like, for example, level number 5, realization will be developed, and you'll be sitting there and there'll be something, and then you just have a realization of what it is that's in front of you. Now, nobody else may have that, and let's say you're in a group, but it comes to you because you have developed that and opened that level of capacity within yourself. So when the information comes, yes, you're going to receive it and it'll be translated in your head. And physical sight, because you're going to start to see etherically when you start moving into those realms. So you are fully equipped. The point I'm making is for the senses, the 5 senses you have 5 levels of development for every sense that deal with 5 levels on each one of those planes is really what it is. It's not level 6 and 7, but it'll be the level, so on and so forth. So that's how you're going to make the journeys that will be made, is because these things are there for you and they will be developed when you need them. And a certain amount of the development needs to be made before you can go do some of these higher level initiations, so on and so forth. So anyway, let's have some discussion on that, because I'm not sure what I said was clear enough for anybody to understand anyway.
Like, me and Mike and I've had, maybe Tom was on those conversations too, but I think, Mike has some good examples where we've talked about these exact things. And when you first are introduced to a new thing, or the first experience, or one of the recognizably first experiences of the higher senses, and it's like, whoa, how did that, what? This is getting weird now. Now things are getting interesting, right?
Getting weird. Okay.
Yeah, now we're going to get weird with it, and that's like, whoa, okay. That's where this is going. No kidding. Didn't see that coming. Let's go,
Mhm.
And we have friends, we have a friend, it's like he saw, he saw things for the first time and it really freaked him out. And it's like, all right, that's where this is going now. We're all this, yeah, it's really interesting, because I guess it's kind of subtle and then it becomes more pronounced. You don't realize it's the transition's happening, I guess, or you're getting this newer thing, or you're making that growth, and then all of a sudden it kind of shows itself a little bit, right?
Sure. And the one thing I will say, though, is that the universe, for the most part, is quite judicious. In other words, it's only, you're seeing things when it's appropriate or they need to be seen. But they don't repeat themselves once you've had the experience. In other words, for people who were dropping acid or whatever, they can drop it every day and they can just keep triggering those chemical responses that give them whatever they are seeing or experiencing. Okay, the universe doesn't do that. It will show you something, you'll see some pattern or whatever. Well, don't look for it to repeat tomorrow and the next day and the next day, because the way I describe that is, it's like a sparkler. The 4th of July one, you light it, it does its burn trick, and you get all this light and sparkles and all that. And when it's done, it's done. Okay, you're not going to light that same sparkler again and expect to have it happen over again. It's made its point. It's presented itself to you. You now have that awareness of whatever it represented, and we're moving on. Okay. And I have seen people who, or have met them, who have had some significant experience when they were younger, and they've spent their whole lifetime trying to reproduce it. Rather than, okay, well, you let go of that. Okay, so, you know, and because a lot of people want that repeat performance. And obviously they do. A lot of them, I mean, it's a drug scenario with certain drugs. I think you're going to get colors, you're going to get pictures, you're going to get blah, 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 blah. And you're entertained. And you want to be entertained again, or you just can't stand the reality you're in. So this one looks better or whatever. But the point is, they just keep going after that same experience and thinking something's happening. When the real thing comes along, it's showing you whatever bit of whatever you're supposed to be seeing, but it's not showing up the next day and the day after that and the day after that.
Carla, is that when we're talking about this with the senses, is that ultimately like a knowing? Like when I think of smell, like sometimes you just randomly have a smell that has nothing to do with where you physically are, but triggers like like, you know, and I'll say this to Donnie. Sometimes every once in a blue moon, there'll be a smell and it smells like my grandmother's house. And I'll be like, oh, Nanny. Okay, yeah. You know, so you have like moments like that, or you know, there's just moments where you just like, even if you meet somebody, you just like know something, you know, whether you see it within, and it's, so to me, like some of that, I don't know if that's one of the levels of each of the senses where, you know, that it's just like a knowing, and you're like, okay, you know, either you accept it, you're like, oh, that was weird. But then like you hit it a few times, you're like, oh, maybe it's, you know, and then you kind of let it go. You don't, you know, you're not chasing after it. Versus someone who, like you said, that have like that psychometry, where that's something that they can work on and they can develop, and trying to understand what it is they're seeing or what they're feeling or what they're understanding. So would different levels be something that could be worked on, like, you know, like someone who has like that psychic ability, the psychometry, where it's something that you can work on and you can kind of hone it as a skill, versus just having moments in your life where you're like, oh, okay, and then it's just something that doesn't make sense as the, you know, the basic of your five senses. So like I said, like smelling, you're like, oh, that, you know, it just triggers something where you think it's something else. Or like I used to, you know, I was a probation officer, so there'd be some people and you meet them, you're like, oh, I remember meeting this one kid, and I said, you know, oh, he's not going to make it. And it wasn't, it was just a feeling. It wasn't like, you know, this kid's, you know, the way he's living. It was just a knowing. The moment I met that kid, I was just like, oh, it's not going to, and within 3 months he had passed. But you know, you know, so to me, is it just like a knowing, or is it something that's developed, or does it depend on which plane or which level?
Well, the point is,
this is big question, but
yeah, no, it's the, in other words, as you study this material, as you grow, as you become more aware of all the potential and the pathway, if you will, because then you're moving your own mental interests up that chart when you're reading the thing. But in other words, that development, and with it will pair the development of those senses that you're needing in a given lifetime. I would not specifically go try to develop them. I would develop conscious awareness and build in the information that's in these books, and it's what I used to pound into Donnie, you know, is just keep working with this, because this stuff, okay, I'm going to jump to something that he will talk in here about the new, I don't know if he says religion, maybe he does, I don't know, will be invocation, evocation. In other words, this is going to be the process for the Aquarian age. You invoke something and it evokes back. So when you read, I could never figure out why, when you read a book here and you read this chapter and then you come back later and you don't even, that doesn't look like what you read even. I don't remember reading this part or whatever, because it had such a different meaning. Okay, well, it took me a long time to figure out. That's what these books do. When you read it, that is the invocation. Okay, and so you put it into your consciousness, and your consciousness will go and evoke the other material related to it back to you. That's why it doesn't look like the same material, or I didn't understand it that way, or I didn't see that depth of material in that material. So that's what I would concentrate on, is just reading the material. Oh, Melinda, I meant to text yesterday. Yeah, she's in Mississippi. So I wouldn't worry about the senses developing, because they're going to develop in their natural organic nature for what you need. And there's no guarantee that they develop in order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, anything. This, you know, this is a very long journey, and we're working on various things. My sister has the ability, she always knew when there were large events happening on the planet, like an airplane crash or a big something. Okay, big events. And so at the time that my father died, and I was back there, I came back with that, and I was there for a while. And I was staying at the house we all grew up in. She has her own house, but we're in same town and all that. She had called me and she said something to the effect, was there any big thing happening on the planet, something in big event, whatever. And I said no. And so then I got to realizing that the night before, and always, or at least for me, if somebody has died that's close to me, I'm out there somewhere. I'm stretched somewhere, other than my normal range. So, and then I realized, geez, you know, in the middle of the night, I woke up and there was this earthquake, and I could hear the buildings falling down, literally. And I thought, boy, are the people going to be surprised tomorrow when they wake up, you know, because I thought it was outside in my neighborhood or something, you know, the earth is tumbling and shattering and they're going to be surprised. And then I went back to sleep and forgot all about it. Well, and then I remembered after she asked me, that was the day this earthquake happened, but it happened in Turkey. And I woke up and I was like there, and because there were two that were very close to each other that happened, not necessarily physically, but time-wise. And that's what my sister was asking me about. And actually I was sleeping in the bed she slept in when we grew up. So, I mean, who knows, you know, I'm popping into a little more extended realm when he was passing anyway. And I mean, I say that because I planned the trip months in advance for that date. And I'd said to a friend of mine, I said, you know, I would not be going back to Minnesota at this point and at that date. but I have to go, you know. And so I was there for a day and a half, and then or a day or so, and he passed. And he had asked me right before he passed at night. I'd already seen him, and mentally, you know, and I said, look, if you're ready to go, it's fine. I'm okay. I got back here. I saw you, you know, we connected. If you're ready, then go. And that was like at 11:30 at night. And my sister calls me at 1:40 and says, he's passed. And do you want to go see him now and check him out, you know, do the checkout or during the day? But the point was, I'd already been aware for quite a while that this was going to happen. I'm the first child. So I don't know if you ever saw that movie, The First Child Handles It Different Than the Second Child. It was one of those women's movies. And because the second one is, if you want to see your mother or your dad, you got to come back now. You know, they're always calling you. So I just said to my sister, no, I said, one of them's going to die in 1995 and the other one in 2001. And I ain't coming back yet. You know, and that's exactly when they died. So somehow I was aware of those things, not that I dwelled on them or anything, but sometimes you just have information like that. And, but anyway, yeah, that would have been a clear audience hearing those buildings drop, you know, and I probably had a certain amount of vision because I could see what it was that was dropping, even though my attitude was, boy, are these people going to be surprised when they wake up tomorrow, meaning my neighbors in this little teeny town, which had nothing to do with it, but it was just an afterthought on my case, you know. So you can pop into those, but I don't run around hearing all that stuff all the time or anything. It just was that when you are or have been around people that are passing or had enough of it or something, you know, then you slip into those realms. I mean, I saw there was somebody waiting for him to come to get him when he was ready to leave, you know, and I saw that, okay, well, he's now gone. The guy came and they went together. There's usually somebody to help them pass over and to go. So that was but then our families, my sister's a little bit like that too. So I mean, she's aware of that, you know, so anyway, but you can pop into those realms. Doesn't mean you're there all the time, but you will pick up information every so often because that sense has been developing. But like I said, it more than anything, it's just you develop yourself and those senses just automatically will kick in where it's appropriate. And you do end up with more information than other people a lot of times, and they can't figure out why you know this or why you know that, and you just innately do. You know, you're getting that feedback. It's that you're open on those levels. And so for this whole development and this whole initiatory development and all of that, as far as where this is going, this evolutionary, you have all the parts and pieces you need to do it. Because you came here with a body and the body is equipped. You know, you need to do the development of it, but it is equipped to handle everything that this planet really needs you to be doing, which is basically why you should be here, period. You know, we've certainly gotten caught up in some of our games and little scenarios we've created and valuing this or valuing that, which may not be of an appropriate purpose for what's going on, but this all will, you got all the senses, you got all the pieces. And I think, in fact, the guy who wrote Twin Dimensions was going to write a book on physics, and then found out when he got into understanding this, that the book that he wrote is the one that came out because he was thinking of it more abstract and separate from humanity, and none of it is. You know, we are part of this whole developmental cycle. So, and the value of shifting off the astral plane to the mental plane is the mental plane is the astral plane is organic. So you have a person who is psychic, and they're psychic for that particular event, whatever's being questioned, but they physically have got to be there. And when they're no longer there, you probably don't, let's assume you don't have another psychic. So now you don't have somebody conveying that information. If you get somebody like Einstein, who's functioning in the mental realm and can get out there and see what's going on and analyze it enough to figure out how to translate it, brings it back and writes it down. Now, anybody and everybody who can get a hold of that piece of information via writing or computers now and whatever else, it can be conveyed across the board. So there is one of the values of using the mental plane in development versus everything's sitting on the astral, for example, and some physical person has to pick up the information. And then you hope it's right, that it hasn't been synthesized through their own framework. So that's just a little side note. So Mike, where are you at with this?
You know, I'm just at this point trying to soak it in. You know, Donnie and I talk quite extensively. We have another friend of ours that, you know, the last few years we've been kind of developing this mostly on our own. And a lot of the experiences that you're talking about, you know, obviously applicable. So just trying to get into the rhythm of trying to get onto this call and listen in.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm really wandering today because there's a number of points I want to bring in, but normally we read a little more. But because the soul is really the game in town right now. In other words, this is where humanity is where they should be going now, is working towards that, because that is the key at this point. You got to get there before you can get anywhere beyond that on that chart. And so better understanding what it is. I mean, the word's been around for a long time. You know, I was certainly brought up, you want to save your soul, you don't want anybody to get your soul, et cetera, et cetera. So I knew there was one, but beyond that, I assumed I had one, everybody else has one. But after that, what? You know, because it hasn't got much interest in us or having tea parties or anything like that with us and any kind of interaction until we're really focused the way they want things, or the soul, what the soul demands, before they're going to have any interest in interacting with us. We got to prove our worth, so to speak. So, but that's pretty much where I think it's at. The second initiation, which just indicates that you've got control of the entire second astral plane, is when, you know, you've got control over your emotions and there isn't anything else there that's going to trigger you to throw you off your game. Each initiation indicates, I believe he's indicated, that you have control of that plane, those 7 levels. And the way that occurs is that you've interacted with all of the vibration patterns that are on that 7-level plane, that you have met them all once. So, because all you need to do is have the contact once and you've got the pattern, you're not going to lose it. And so then what happens is if that vibration gets triggered, you've already got the counterbalance to it, the positive to the negative. It can be neutralized out. You don't have to respond to it. It's not going to throw you into a tizzy or you're off running here or there. And it's that way with each plane, is you evidently can make it through to the next level when you aren't going to, there's nothing that can occur on that plane that's going to draw you back to that because you haven't experienced it. And consequently, then you move up and you start working on the next plane and everything that's in there. And then you pass through the little portal or the gate or the door or however you want to put it. But it is, you can pass through because there's no obstacle blocking you. In other words, there's no missing vibrations that could yet to be sounded that you don't have the response to. So if the door is electromagnetic, at that moment, both sides are equal and you can pass through the middle, so to speak. That's pretty much what it is. And when they talk about the dweller on the threshold, it's everything you've built up that you can't let go of. With the life you got now, to be able to move forward into a realm that is technically unknown to you. You know, even though obviously you know what the mental plane is, you're moving off of the astral to the mental. You technically know what the mental is, but the ante gets a little higher after that in terms of what you're willing to give up, what you're willing to let go of to go forward. It's almost a mechanical process after a while. I mean, you can recognize it as one. It's not complicated. We're only a reflection of reflection of reflection, right? In just about everything that's here. So.
But you had told me earlier, and that's what I was getting, that you still operate on all those levels. They're just not holding you anymore. You're not going to get sucked in.
Yeah, you can identify with them, because otherwise, if you couldn't, in fact, I think that's what they thought when in the 60s, when they brought over the Eastern religions, that when you went to Nirvana, then you would just be up in Nirvana and sitting there forever. Now you just got there, you'd never be coming back. Well, that's not true. You are capable of responding to every one of those and identifying with every one of those vibrations all the way up. So you can resonate to it. And that's why you can turn around and probably talk to just about anybody at that point. Most of the people who we would consider have evolved up to a high level, little gurus or whatever. Aside from the fact they always say they just laugh at you. I've read that many times, they'll just sit there and laugh. But they should be able to hold a conversation with anybody because they can relate. You don't stop relating. You literally can resonate to all of that energy that you are now in, have passed the tests on, if you will. You go up and down it. That's probably why, actually, for the ones who want to stay elevated or work on something special or something, I mean, Obi-Wan Kenobi came out of the desert. Okay, for Star Wars. He was living out in the desert alone somewhere, because you see him kind of walking out. He's not living in the middle of a city, because he's going to resonate to everybody next door to him that he meets and he sees. It's automatic. It just happens. So if you want to get something done and you're working on higher levels like these guys, with this material and other groups, I think they were in Tibet, and they're not in a big city. They're, They're where there's quiet, peace, quiet, and probably not a whole lot of other extraneous people other than the people that they associate with their material. Because they're going to come down to interact. It's just automatic. You know, and we have a lot of programs like that. The astrology program is no different. You got 12 signs, and you got what, 3 dimensions of them in terms of it's the sign, the placement, the whatever. But those are basic, because within those, even no matter what the combination, we can interact with other people because we're still on the basic program. You know, families, religions, your morals, your ethics, your neighborhood, your home, you know. So we've all got a general understanding along with the variations that can come, but it's a variations of 12 basic things. So it's significant to understand that, yes, we gain this, but we also resonate to everything we've been through, you know, and we will go there just automatically if we're in the environment where there's people, especially old libraries over there.
You can see that real that pattern in the Bible where they go out in isolation for periods and then come back and teach the next thing, back in isolation, kind of back again. That's a consistent kind of pattern there.
Yeah, it's probably why Moses went away too.
Yeah, and the mountain, you know, that's pretty significant, you know.
It's funny you
Symbolic.
mentioned that. It's funny you mentioned it because it was on TV last night also. We were
Oh.
watching. I guess because it's leading up to Easter for next week. So the 10 Commandments was on yesterday.
Well,
I
and I
saw that.
yeah, and I think weren't they really ragging on him during this trip too? Yeah, he'd never be able to drum up the 10 Commandments with them ragging on him. I want to go back and I'm hungry and feed me and I need some more clothes and let's turn around. It was better back where I was than where you're leading me, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so and I'm sure that that's the whole principle of meditation too, for that matter. But by the way, when it comes to meditation, I think it was Paramahansa Yogananda, because I was just lived up the hill from SRF, but my mentor had been active and had known him and some other people in that environment when I was there. And somebody had, I think, had asked him something about, because he was probably either not well or getting ready to die or whatever the transition mode was. And they said something about, you better start meditating. He said, my whole life has been a meditation. That's probably the best answer to that one.
And that takes place when you're more stable on the mental plane.
Yeah, and I would assume that he was considered a master, so he would have been functioning on the Buddhic plane also. But the slow feed, I mean, and that's important to understand, is that transition, that energy transition within you needs to be slow. And now I have heard from people who, masters who have incarnated, let's put it that way, have indicated that they, at a certain age, and it'll be age more than I understand that the Buddha, I think by the age of 5 is aware of who he is or something. But for most of them, they, at a certain point, they need to recapitulate to where what level they have had developed prior to this incarnation. And they may do that relatively quickly. That's the point I'm making. They will be able to do that relatively quickly on a recapitulation, but it's because they had developed in previous lifetimes at a slower pace. But that transition and energy is slow and subtle, and the farther up you are, he says, the subtler it is, to a point where you may not even recognize it's happening because your brain just cannot record on those levels. It's not developed to record on those upper levels yet, because I imagine for the most part, it hasn't had much need. There haven't been that many people who have achieved those goals, that it's got a real quick program developed. But that they do recapitulate, but they have to do that. They have to go through those stages. It was her comments and her conversations. She was a friend of mine that I knew who really was far more aware of all this.
So you're saying if somebody was gonna, in this life, take whatever number, they would have to progress through from the beginning quickly?
Yes, they do, but they go through quickly. I think DK says you're pretty much where you were by the time you're 21 of where you left. I think I've seen him say that you're up to speed by the time you were 21 was his comment. You pick up where you left off. But I'm saying that what Gail had said to me was that, because I think it was the Maharishi, she worked with the Maharishi quite a bit, that the indication had been that even in his case, where he would have been a master before incarnating at this point, he would have recapitulated all the way up to that point. It would have been at a speed that we wouldn't do, you know, because we have to go through stage by stage, and I wouldn't think, well, I mean, everything would indicate here that if you were just an absolute newbie, you're not going from bottom to top in one lifetime. The physical couldn't take it. Okay. And the psyche might not be able to take it either. You make it's like the little anachron I was talking about, that line of light. You make a connection with something, and then you've got the connection. There's the feed, that exchange, that absorption of those higher levels, building them in, and they're going on, and then it's part of your body after that. I mean, that's what you do here. That's what reading this material does. And it's catchy. It's you know, he talks about the being around people who study it, and the atomic structure. It's, you know, and this is a lot of material to throw at you. He will talk about the first of all, everybody's got a permanent atom, and the various ones, and for every round, of which we're in the 4th round, that's normal. Okay, is the normal people are in the 4th round. You have, even though you have the permanent atom, you still, there have the information has to be able to get in and to your system. So they have what they call spirilla. I don't know if any of you run into, the only one who would have been is reading all this pieces of this here, there, and elsewhere, like a whirling dervish is Donnie. So he's run across the term spirilla, but I don't expect most of you would. And it is a vortice that goes into the permanent atom. And for each round, which are very long periods of time for this planet, there's a spirilla. In other words, this vortice that go so that you can absorb into the system, the one you got, the information of that round. And so 4th round, there's 4 spirilla in there now. And then there's a few people who are what they call fifth rounders, I guess is the way they put him, he said, where they're pushing ahead further. And so they're a little advanced from whatever's average in the fourth round. And there aren't, but there are not a lot of fifth round spirilla hanging around here. And that not only for the permanent atoms, because all this gets recycled and the next incarnation comes and pulls out of the trash bin, well, not trash bin. It goes back into the reclamation cycle anyway. And you pull that out when you're being reborn and need to build a body. So he makes a remark, there aren't as many fifth round spirilla that are available if somebody appropriate wants to incarnate. So, and that there are also fifth round atoms with 5 spirilla, but he talks about, because they get shedded, which ought to say something to you about viruses and about etheric and about what I'm talking about in terms of they're connected in some way. And so he said a lot of times what happens is somebody who's born into a family where you've got the parents are, let's say they're fifth rounders. So, and they've got that material and they've been able to work with that in their physical body. And then the atoms will also have a fifth, and some of those atoms and stuff will get shed and they'll be picked up by the child. Okay, so a lot of times you see this genius or this level of awareness on some realm continuing, and it looks like it's hereditary, but it's probably as more than anything else, it's environmental, because he's able to work with, gets the material to build the body to work with, functioning on that level. And so that's in a sense what I also mean about it's catchy. And if you get exposed to this material, your brain, when it gets it, your consciousness is going to go looking for matches and information. And I mean, and your soul is hungering for this. Anyway, it's just waiting until you take a look at it and are interested in driving in that direction. And like I said, prior to that, it doesn't have any interest in you anyway. It's just got its back turned. It's looking upward. That's where it wants to go. But there ain't nothing happening down here yet until you really have a clue. But your processes that are in there, when they get this kind of information, they can use it, then they can work with it, they can develop, and you'll develop ultimately because of it. So, you know, it's like, it's truth. If they hear truth, that resonates, you know. And so what I'm saying is whenever you hear something that's the truth, it has an impact on you. Other things can just be water off a duck's back. Tom.
This has been incredibly engaging. I think I got a lot out of the when you were talking about some of the stuff that hits you once and it really doesn't come back, because there's been some things that I've gone through my process, and I now know after hearing that you know, I've had some of these profound experiences and it's like they haven't happened again, and now I kind of understand why, and also know that there's really no need for me to try to go back and seek them again, because I just need to keep moving forward. So I'm glad we really talked about that to some length, because that's something I've been struggling with a little bit lately. So yeah, I know now, no backtracking, just keep on moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. And you're kind of on the receiving end, right? Generally, you know, I mean, these things show up when they show up. And the one thing DK talks about, as you get at different levels, you see things or you look at them differently. And he talks about once you get over the Buddhic level and you're up in those realms, you just look at something that might be, he uses the word significant or have significance, because first of all, anything going on up there has nothing to do with down here, nor is it interested in what's going on down here. The lower three worlds that we live in all the time, it has no interest in participating. It's not going to feed you information about it, so on and so forth. It's happening up here, and it's a lot less event packed than the phenomena we go through here every day. So, and when it's time for something to happen, it just happens. It shows up in your consciousness. It does whatever its thing is, and it's gone. And then, so the key then is one either interprets it properly, or one thinks they did something wrong and that's why it's not coming back, you know, or something like that. When those are not the case, it's just you're traveling on through and hitting the certain marks that have some meaning, and off you go.
Yeah, that's what it's been like for me, because it's like I've been questioning. It's like, did I lose the way? It's just because this stuff isn't happening again, but that's not it at all. It's just, it's already with me, and it's always going to be there, and I just got to keep moving on until the next thing comes. So much appreciated for that. I do have a general question, and it's a little bit offshoot here, but it kind of triggers back to my visit to New York, because I did get to spend some time with my grandmother, who's just about 100 now. But she suffers from dementia. She, like, carrying a conversation with her is basically answering the same 5 questions over and over again. And like, I just kind of wonder, like, what's going on with an old soul like that? Like, because there's something there, but you just don't get the information out of them like you used to. I know the soul's not gone, but what's going on with it with someone like that? I wondered about that when I visited with her this week.
They're leaving.
They're leaving.
I mean, in other words, we gradually leave.
Yeah.
We don't make, unless there's an accident, we don't make a fast exit
Okay.
under normal circumstances. And so astrologically, those outer planets take on more of a focus at that time. So the outer 3 that don't have anything to do with our normal everyday life here, the Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And Neptune shears off stuff, so pretty soon you don't remember this or that. That goes a little slower, but basically after probably somewhere in the 70s, I suppose, you start to make an exit. You gradually leave. It's just like you got here quick, got born, but then, you know, it takes a while to get into the groove of what's here. First 11 years, they're not easy. I mean, you got a lot of stuff you got to do before you can even move into your teen years. So that's our entrance, and we have an exit that is more gradual. Like I said, unless it's an accident or something, under most circumstances. Now at about 82 is where you would look for like lymph node action, stuff like that. That shows up at about 82, where you might have something going on in the lymph nodes. 84 is something sudden that takes, or it's 84. It's Uranus comes one full cycle. It releases the electromagnetic field for a period of time at then. So even somebody might just get a flu, and not the one we got around here now, but a flu that just throws them off and they can't beat it, and it's unexpected and they're gone. That was a release at 84. If you make it through 84, you get probably about 4 years without any action happening, where you could be okay if you make it through that stage. But we're pretty much planned to exit around in the 80s. For the most part, that's our lifespan now. And as you can see, most people, unless they've done something that speeds it up a little bit with health problems or something, that would be our normal exit time at this point in time. And the Pluto will pretty much take you out for sure if you have it. And we've had a short Pluto cycle where you could get the opposition at 90. And I've seen people die right to the minute on that exacting.
Wow.
By that time, they have no more interest in what's going on here. They're just, they managed to live that long. They missed the other two cycles, but that will go to 120 or 130. So that won't be a takeout eventually, just simply because the cycle, they have an elliptic cycle. We're in the short end of it right now, but it'll be long, and then, but most of them will go before that. And that is our normal range at this point in time, normally lifespan, under most circumstances. So yeah, there's a disconnect. The brain disconnects a little bit, the dysfunctions. We are a very delicate organic creature.
Right.
So we need, and the thing about it is, like I said, you're born with a body. It's what you come with. It's what you leave with. What you take with you, we know, is your experiences, those vibrations, whatever gets stored in the soul. So that's really the true organic purpose of us being here on this planet as planetary issue, is because we are the consciousness creating units, and we are meant to go all the way up that chart and develop. And so for that, we are fully equipped. We come with everything we need for that. But what we lose, because there's so much phenomena now that's been created. Consciousness helps create phenomena, because you get a bright idea. Let's invent this, let's invent that, let's do this, let's do that. And so pretty soon you get absorbed and enamored with all of that. And we miss this route. I mean, we miss it because it's not, we aren't looking there, and it's not developed even.
Mhm.
Or it's shoved off to the side, which it does every so often with spirituality and every so often with astrology, when somebody wants to come in and focus on something else. But the bottom line is, the real essence is, everything you need to do what you're really supposed to do on this planet, you got.
Mhm.
And it's a matter of, first of all, understanding the developmental phases, be willing to come and go a few times on this trip, make some exits and entrances, and go through that entire process. But it's for what we're designed, really truly designed for. That's why when somebody says, well, humanity ain't going to make it, we're going to have to shove computer chips in them and this and that, because they won't be able to survive. The one who ain't going to be able to survive is the one who can't see the journey. Yes, they can try as hard as they want to stop time, so to speak.
Mhm.
They want to stop time differently than this process, because this process moves you beyond time at a certain point in that chart. It just does, because that's a brain function, basically time, for the most part, in terms of just the creation of the consciousness and the looping of the cycles and so on and so forth, get you to a point where you experience, because time comes in discrete packages, actually. So it comes in chunks. It's not continuous. It's just that you've got, the looping is so continuous that you experience this as continual time, having a continuum that it really doesn't have. But anyway, that's another story. But the bottom line is you got everything you need to go through here for the purposes of which you were born and for the purposes of this planet of which you are part. So it's all the other stuff that everybody thinks they need, you know, and they don't realize that they're the ones really doing it. I mean, if you don't have the body or it's not working really well, you know, lots of things aren't going to happen for you here. And it's not that you need all this other equipment for the most part. It isn't, those things aren't it, it's you interacting with whatever you interact with out there.
Mhm.
So, but the spiritual journey, it's everything's included. This is an all-inclusive trip if you can make the trip, if you direct yourself to make the trip.
There's no Spirit 7-Elevens along the way to pick up the extra tools. They're already there. We just got to find them.
You got them. They got to be developed. That's all.
Right.
And that's really what we're in the process of doing and have been through the whole journey. But at this point, we're probably at a juncture where we may have to really set, well, and we're changing an age. So we're in that battleground too of refocusing. And then probably there's a number of people who don't want to make that refocus and they don't want to make the journey. Let's just try to hold things back here and keep them the way they are. Because we were doing really good here at this point, you know, from their attitude and the value system of, I got lots of money now and I'm really smart and this is really a nice planet. And, you know, if we could just eliminate a bunch of people here and it's going to be a lot nicer and, you know, we'll have a vacation paradise, so to speak. So, I mean, it's a battle, that's all. And it would be appropriate. Astrologically, it's appropriate. It's appropriate from the changing of the age. That would be the time to try to make the strike if you could. But so that's the way I see what's going on. But in the long run, that monadic energy, that energy that's trapped in that little atom can never be stopped. You can try to hold it down for a while, but it just builds tension and pressure and it's still going to move forward. So.
Very helpful.
Yeah. Well, Donnie.
Yeah, we're at a pretty good point there, I think,
Okay.
for this week.
Yeah, we went almost 3.5 hours with no break. That's impressive.
Mhm.
I didn't notice that.
I didn't either. It flew right by.
Yeah, it goes and goes and goes. Yeah.
Okay, so just plan on next week again. Let all this settle. Let the dust from this explosion settle.
And wait for the next one to come.
Yeah,
We're on page 40 now.
yeah, we got back to where we started.
We're making progress.
Yes, I think so. We got to say goodbye. She wasn't here when, or did you already shut it off?
Sorry,
No, I
guys.
didn't shut it off yet. No.
Oh, sorry, guys. My computer. When Carla, remember when I told you I fell last week? When I tripped and fell and sprained my hand? Well, because I fell on my Chromebook.
Oh,
So
nice.
everyone, yeah. So everyone, yeah, I sprained my hand pretty bad. I forget I can't type on the keyboard. I was going to send you a quick note in the chat. So every time I type on the keyboard, it shuts down.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Never see the chat. I don't even know what the chat is.
It's on the bottom. Would have to click it would pop up if somebody put something in the chat. It would pop up. But I was gonna just type into the chat because I have to pop because my daughter wants lunch. So and so as soon as I started typing, the computer shut down. So,
Oh.
my apologies. So I only missed like a couple minutes, but I'm gonna have to
Sorry.
pop off just get her fed.
Yeah, I got it. Same here.
Likewise.
I got pine cones calling me.
Pine cones, you said?
Lots of pine cones.
I got yard work, man.
Yeah. No, I know. You've been hard at work since you bought the house.
Yeah, you're good.
I should do some more housework around here. Probably
All
wouldn't be
right, I'm
falling
gonna
apart.
shut this recording down real quick. You can keep going. We can keep talking, but I'm gonna shut that down.